What's up guys, it's Trevor with Embers Living. Today we're in our fireplace section of our showroom and we're gonna settle a debate. I wouldn't call it a debate. I'm gonna say one of the biggest questions that we get when people are shopping for a fireplace. Biggest question I get is gonna be, should you buy a gas fireplace or an electric fireplace? And what the heck is the difference between the two? Well, what I'm gonna do in this video, we're gonna stay in each category. We're gonna start with gas, then we'll move to electric. I'm gonna break it down in 4 categories and tell you the main difference between these 4 categories. And that's gonna be performance, installation, aesthetics, and cost. We'll talk about the pros and cons of each one between gas and electric. You guys have to subscribe though, helps us out a ton when you guys do that. Follow us on our other platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all the other social media platforms, on and on and on. Hit us up on all those as well. Should we get started? Let's go. Okay, so we're starting in the gas section, and first let's talk with gas fireplaces, let's talk performance. All right, so is gas or electric better when it comes to performance? Let's talk gas for a minute. Like I always say, don't take this as hard and fast rules, think about your particular needs. For example, in general, gas fireplaces are gonna heat better. I'm gonna tell you why in a second. But that may not be better for your needs. So let's say you live in Florida or the South or Southern California, Phoenix, someplace where you don't need a lot of heat. That may not be better for you. So I'm gonna tell you why gas fireplaces heat better. Let's have a little science project here. As Ron Burgundy says, it's science, right? It's simple. What makes gas fireplaces, how do they fundamentally heat? Well, a lot of people think gas fireplaces are phony, which they're not. They're actually real fire. What do you need for real fire? You need an oxygen source and you need a fuel source. So its fuel is either natural gas or propane, and then direct vent fireplaces pull their own oxygen into a sealed firebox. As a result, fire heats up, and just like a wood stove or even a gas stove for that matter, they're gonna radiate heat and have put more heat out into the room. For example, we have a couple powerhouse heaters over here. So for example, here's a couple powerhouse heaters. I talk about radiant heat off of gas fireplaces and why you don't need a blower. We'll include a link below on that video if you want to check that out. But fundamentally, that's how they heat, is you have a real fireball? No, you have real fire that's radiating heat into the room. In principle, on a very simplified way, it works very, very similar to a wood stove, but with gas as your fuel source, if that makes sense. So that's how they heat. Because of that, they can be built very, very efficiently, and these are pumping heat into the room radiantly and also with convection heat. Convection heat would be like blower type heat that's blowing out into the room. So if you're looking for heat, which I would say the majority of the United States is, gas fireplaces in general are much more powerful heaters than electric fireplaces. And we'll tell you why when we get into the electric room, how those heat. But essentially, these have the ability to heat a much larger space in general. That being said, because they are such powerful heaters, it can cause problems. It can cause your wall to get too hot. Yeah, that's hot. For televisions, artwork, mantles, or if you're in one of those warmer climates and you want the realism of a gas fireplace, but you don't want the heat, there are some solutions for that. For example, let's talk over here. So one alternative to get television, artwork, wood tight to the fireplace is what they call a cool wall kit. Now, each manufacturer has different names. For simplicity's sake, I think it creates the best word picture to just call it a cool wall kit. Essentially, this is an example of one. We have this mounted pretty low. In a real home setting, you have it mounted higher, but I'm just kind of showing you so you can feel the heat coming out of here. What this is basically taking about half the heat or so, going up through duct systems in behind this wall, and then dumping the heat out here. So it's sort of bypassing the heat coming out the front and then coming out here. So it minimizes how hot this wall gets, which means we can get televisions, artwork, things like that tighter to the wall. Again, I have a video on this if you haven't heard about that before. I do a lot of videos. We'll include a link below if you want to see more details on how a fireplace can get tight to the wall. There also is one option if you're dead set on having gas fireplace with zero heat. There are some options like that. Let me show you. All right, so here's an example of a gas fireplace that actually is putting off zero heat. There are applications where people would want this. Like I said, if you live in a warm climate, this particular model is a big commercial grade unit. So a lot of restaurants, hotels, things like that, if there's tables with people eating, they don't want a ton of heat dumping on them. So this is a cool wall unit, or cool glass unit, I should say. So this glass is cool to the touch. And basically, I would say 99% of our heat is going away. So that is an option with gas fireplaces. The biggest thing with that is going to be, it's usually a complicated install and fairly expensive. So for example, on this model, we have a power vent on the cap, on the roof, and that's basically sucking out all the heat. So it is doable, but in general, it's gonna be fairly costly and it's gonna be a more complicated install, but you can do a gas fireplace without any heat. So just to recap, in general, from a performance standpoint, gas fireplaces are more powerful, they're better heaters, and there are alternative options to get zero to no heat or to do artwork or televisions, but it usually involves a little bit more complicated install, which brings me to my next point. Let's talk installation. All right, let's talk installation. Now, I mentioned these are direct vent type units. That's really what we're focusing on. I'm not gonna get into vent-free stuff. I have other videos on that if you wanna watch them. I'm not gonna get into B-vent units. By far, our best-selling gas fireplaces are direct vent units. What that means is they're pulling their own oxygen into the firebox and then also simultaneously exhausting. So it's a double wall pipe, and usually on an install, it's not too complicated. You can see our pipes here. All direct vent fireplaces do require that they are vented. So that is a requirement. So it does make it a little bit trickier, but thankfully with these gas fireplaces, direct vents can either terminate out a sidewall or they can go up through a roof. This is a shared wall with our neighbors here, so everything's going through the roof. So it does require a little bit of homework because you have to make sure you can vent a fireplace. That can especially be tricky, maybe in a basement install or something like that. Again, too, because we're dealing with real fire here, when we're installing, we usually have clearances. Not usually, we do. Those are mandatory, which means when we're framing with a 2x4 wall, typically what you see here, this is a 64-inch unit, and people are like, oh, I have 64 inches, I'll just pop this in. No, this firebox probably goes out to here on both sides. You just can't see it behind the wall. So you usually need, whatever you want your window to be, you're gonna need an even bigger space, and you're especially gonna need clearances on your height. So you have to make sure we have plenty of framing width and height when we're framing or planning for a gas fireplace. Also, because these are using real fire with a lot of heat, they're generally very robust. So especially the nicer units, they're several hundred pounds. So they're bigger, heavier units, usually require a little more gusto, a couple guys to get these set in place. But if you're just doing a simple up and out rear vent type unit, as long as you're maintaining your clearances, the install is not overly overwhelming, if that makes sense. But like I mentioned, when it comes to performance, if we're doing cool wall systems or we're dumping heat outside using external fans, or if we're doing power vents, or if we're doing cool wall kits like this, your installs can become more complex. When we start getting into cool wall type systems like this, or if we're power venting and we're trying to do zero heat with external fans and dumping heat outside, and then sometimes sending heat into the room, that's all doable. But when we start getting cute with stuff like that, our install can become a little more complex. But in general, if we're just doing a simple up and out install, even if it's going through the roof fairly straight, gas fireplaces, our direct vent fireplaces, are not terribly difficult to install. They just, again, you have to be mindful of your framing clearances and your vent. You have to make sure you have a spot for a vent usually. Usually the vents are either 7 inches or 8 inches, and then they require a 2-inch clearance all the way around when they're running horizontally. So figure you need a foot or so of clearance. So the piping is not usually huge. and again, not super problematic, but that's in general how a gas fireplace installs. So that's installation on a gas fireplace. All right, let's talk aesthetics now. The logical side of it should tell us, because we have a real fire, in general, it's going to be more aesthetically pleasing. And I think that's true. I mean, this is just an example. This is the Napoleon Elevation series. And because we have a real flame, I think aesthetically, if you're looking for a very traditional firebox with this model, I think it looks awesome. Don't you think, Chris? You think it looks pretty real?
Yeah, it looks good.
Yeah. And usually because gas fireplaces are deeper and bigger than electrics, we have more room in the firebox. So you can see we have a lot of room to have larger logs, sort of a layered flame. For example, let me just shut off this rear burner here. So you can see we have layers to our flame, just like a real fireplace would. So that also helps us to create the realistic look. So when we're dealing with a real flame, in general, we're gonna have a much more realistic look, and then we can have fun with some LED lights, night lights, a lot of variety in brick panels, a lot of variety in fronts. You can see Chris is going to give you an overview of the showroom. We have arches, you know, copper, gold, you name it. There's a lot you can do with gas fireplaces. This is a traditional one. We show you the modern ones too. A ton of variety and ton of flexibility, but the important thing is the flame looks very realistic because we have a real fire going in general, especially the nicer gas fireplaces. So that's aesthetics. All right, finally, let's talk costs. All right, I think you guys could probably predict this by now. You're probably starting to see a theme. You have real fire, heavier units, a little more robust install. In general, gas fireplaces are gonna cost more. There is some variability to that, which we'll talk about in the electric room. But especially when we get into these larger linears, you know, these bigger linears are becoming very, very popular, 60+ inch gas fireplaces. The cost starts to creep up there a little bit, but you're getting what you pay for. You're getting a big gas fireplace, a lot of heat. But in general, that's when we really see the separation between gas and electric. For example, maybe on a smaller gas unit, the gas and electric prices are gonna be similar. But when we get into these bigger gas, we really start to see gas fireplaces become more expensive. That being said, even if the bodies of the fireplaces are close, let's say the gas fireplace is similar to an electric, you're usually gonna spend more, of course, on install because you're gonna have piping to buy. You're gonna obviously need to hire a professional installer. That usually costs extra money. So your install costs are gonna be more too on a gas fireplace, but you are getting more fireplace, so to speak. You're getting bigger, deeper fireplace, bigger, more robust logs, real flame, more heat. So in that sense, you are getting what you pay for, but in general, these bigger gas fireplaces are gonna be more expensive. All right, that's enough gas fireplaces. Chris, you're getting really hot back here, aren't you?
Yeah.
And it doesn't help that the high today is 90, so we better get these shut off and head into the electric room. Which brings me to performance with electric. See where I'm going there? Let's talk performance with electric fireplaces. Okay, so how do electric fireplaces fundamentally heat? We went into it a little bit with gas fireplaces. Well, obviously with electric, I think it goes without saying that we don't have any real fire here. So there are, I guess we could call them, they're not really fuel sources or fire bed or ember bed, but for the sake of argument, there's basically two different types right now of electric fireplaces. There's usually LED backlit or sort of light bulbs, which is, you know, majority of electric fireplaces. Or we'll show you some close-ups. There are a couple water vapor technology fireplaces where they're using water to sort of create the flame. Either way, whether it's LED lights or water, obviously neither one of those are a heat source. So the way that electric fireplaces heat is they essentially have an electric heater in them, and they're going to use convection heat or a blower heat to blow heat out into the room, and that's really running independently of the flame. That's really one of the biggest differences between electrics and gas, is the heat operates independent from your visualization. With a gas fireplace, because we have real flame, when your fire's turned on, that flame is producing heat. No way around it. It's just whether you can dump that heat or send it into the room. That's one of the cool things with electrics, especially if you're in a warmer climate, is you can essentially run these all summer long without any heat. You can run your visualization independent from your heater. So that's a really cool thing with electric fireplace. However, the heaters that are in this fireplace, in general, I mean, they're different from manufacturers, but in general, they all pretty much run the same. You know, you can either, in most fireplaces, you can either run them on 120 volt and you send 5,000 BTUs into the room, which usually heats 400 square feet. And then some models, like the Dimplex Ignite down here, has a 220, 240 volt option where we can double our BTU output between 9 and 10,000, and now we can heat 800 square feet. That being said, their heaters are definitely less powerful than a gas fireplace. They're more supplemental type heat. Even the Ignite XL, which I think has the best heater in all gas fireplaces, it fundamentally just doesn't heat like a radiant gas fireplace. It just doesn't. Again, depending on your situation, that may not be a bad thing. In fact, what we see a lot of homeowners do, I done this myself at my house, is they have a gas fireplace in the main room to heat, you know, my main areas of the house. And then electric fireplaces are awesome in bedrooms where you don't need as much heat. I don't like to sleep hot, so I just want a little bit of heat, and usually your bedroom's smaller anyways. And these are more than fine for supplemental heat sources. There's also some really good applications for these, which we'll talk about in a second. But essentially, that's how the performance works. That's how the heaters work in an electric fireplace. So that's performance on electric fireplace. All right, when it comes to installation, I think this is where electric fireplaces have obviously the biggest advantage compared to gas fireplaces, is how they install. So fundamentally, we learned that these don't have real fire. So if they don't have real fire, what don't they need? What do you think, Chris?
Gas.
They don't need, that's true, they don't need gas, but they also don't need pipe. They don't need to exhaust, because there's no actual real fire that we need to exhaust anymore. Because remember, for the majority's sake, these are light bulbs. So for example, this wall that we have here in the showroom, they don't require any venting, so that solves a lot of problems. And then two, this particular wall either fits in a 2x4 or a 2x6 wall. So they have the option to be very, very narrow, unlike gas fireplaces. So this, you could essentially cut a hole in your wall, which you'd want done by a professional, of course, and essentially slide them into a wall with little to no construction, with really your only thing is getting electrical to the unit, framing it out, electrical, boom, you're done. So they have a really, really easy advantage when it comes to installation. I would say our most complex unit is gonna be something like this, which is a water vapor fireplace. And even then, it's essentially the same principle. Again, it's not requiring any venting or anything like that. And of course, it looks realistic, which we'll get to in a minute. But your most complex thing is gonna be getting water to it. Again, not a huge problem. They also have options to fill up water tanks, so it's not a hindrance with installs. Where is this a huge advantage? Well, as we talked about, places where you can't do vent-free gas fireplaces, which is a separate video, but for example, here in Colorado, vent-free gas fireplaces are not an option because our altitude is too high. And so if someone needs vent-free, so high-rises, condos, hotels, where they can't get exhaust vents out, electric fireplaces are an awesome solution. Also, especially here in Colorado, we do a ton of electric fireplaces in basement finishes. Sometimes you can get vents or exhausts done in a basement, but again, it can be costly. You have to make sure you're above grade for snow and things like that. With electric fireplaces, again, you don't have to worry about that. And again, what we see very commonly is we'll see people put in gas fireplaces upstairs, and when they do their basement finish, they'll do an electric fireplace, because again, you pretty much just have to frame it, get a power to it, and you're ready to rock. Very simple. So definitely electric fireplaces are much easier to install. All right, now let's talk aesthetics when it comes to electric fireplaces. Okay, aesthetically, I think this is where electric fireplaces are really starting to gain a lot of momentum. As I mentioned with gas, I think gas still looks more realistic because we're dealing with real flame. But even 5 years ago, gas visually looked here and electric looked here. But as electronic technology is developing, the gap is closing aesthetically between them. And I'll tell you what I mean by that when I talk about some different units here. But they've come out with newer technologies. You can see here, this is an example of very traditional units. We have operable doors, which again looks like very traditional gas fireplace, which I think lends to the realism. And then they're using sort of this mirror technology to replicate what I was talking about in gas fireplaces, where it looks like our flame is coming up out of the middle of our log set to sort of recreate that realistic look. So that's one way that they become more realistic. And for example, this unit here, so for example, this is another example of flame looking like it's coming up out of the middle. Do you think this looks pretty real, Chris?
Yeah, it sounds real too.
Yeah, so they have sound. They can really sort of recreate the realistic look. I think this one looks pretty real. Some customers love, hate it, but this is basically using almost like a translucent HD monitor with flame. And then you can see there's actual logs on the ceiling here that are projecting logs in behind the flame. So again, it looks like the flame is coming up out of the middle. So electric fireplaces have really come a long way. And then also, let's talk about colors for a minute. Okay, also with electric fireplaces, because they're using LED lights, we have the option for multicolor flames, which obviously with a gas fireplace, your actual flame can't change color because it's a real fire, which doesn't change color. But because we have multicolor LED lights, you can see we have more options to get more playful or have more fun with the electric fireplaces, especially in the modern contemporary setting. And again, it's not necessarily that this is going for realism, but it's just really fun, and a lot of people love the multicolor option, which you can definitely do with electric fireplaces. But probably the biggest advancement I've seen with electric fireplaces is gonna be the water vapor technology. Now, I would say, Chris, would you say this is the most realistic electric that we have?
I like this one and the other water vapor one.
Yeah, we'll show you the other water vapor one. But here's where the water vapor technologies really become a game changer, is all of our LED lights are two-dimensional, which obviously real fire is not two-dimensional. The water vapor is an actual three-dimensional flame with sort of substance to it. And to me, that's when that flame really looks the most realistic. In fact, this gap has been closed so much so that it actually fooled one of our customers. You guys probably are starting to know him. He pops up now and then. We actually got some footage of Mr. Know-It-All in the showroom last week. Watch how he got fooled when it comes to electric fireplaces. Hey, what's up, Mr. Know-It-All? Nice to see you.
Hey, Travis, good to see you. How you been?
Trevor.
Why'd you change your name?
I didn't.
You?
Anyways, when you were looking for a fire, you just call me Travis. It's fine.
Yeah, Travis. So what's going on here is I got another project going.
Okay.
And I want it to look as realistic, like a wood fire as possible.
Okay.
But I can do no venting.
Okay, no venting?
No venting.
It's in the mountains, you said?
Yeah, what do you got for me?
So the problem is in the mountains, we can't do vent free, so we're gonna have to go with an electric fireplace.
Oh, I hate to do this every time I come in here, Trevor, but I cannot do electric. That disgusts me.
Okay. Okay, well.
See, this is what I'm talking about. Look at this. It fits in a mountain home. It looks like this is a real wood burning fire. How does the gas get to look like this? This is what I want.
That's the thing, Mr. Know-It-All. You didn't let me finish. That's actually a water fireplace.
Are you kidding me?
No, that's how good they look. That's actually made, that's water coming out of it. That's not real flame.
You're telling me this is electric?
Yes, that's an electric fireplace.
Oh my God. Oh, good. You're yanking my chain again. This is blowing my mind. What in the world is this? I'm speechless.
That was pretty funny, Mr. Know-It-All. Seems like we can never shake that guy. He's always in our store messing around with us. All right, let's talk cost. Okay, we kind of went through this already with gas fireplaces, but again, just to reiterate, I would say when you're 50 inches and under, your costs of the actual unit are gonna be very, very similar, I would say, for the most part. It's when you get above that 50-inch mark, there's a few exceptions. Electric fireplaces in general are gonna be more affordable, and not so much from the cost of buying the equipment, but like we said, install costs are much cheaper. Again, we don't have any venting to worry about. They're much lighter weight. You just need an electrician to wire to it. Here we have a TV somebody jacked our sound bar. Somebody took our sound bar. Sound bars, that can all be tight to the fireplace. You don't have to worry about heat management systems, which can end up saving you a considerable amount of money. So in general, electric fireplaces are more affordable. As these two new technologies develop, however, for example, our water vapor fireplaces, those are in general more expensive, and they're going to be definitely on par with a gas fireplace. But again, even if you're spending the same, it's still not apples to apples, because you're going to save a considerable amount of money when it comes to installation. So in general, electric fireplaces are more affordable as a finished product, if that makes sense. So we're just here to educate you. Our salesmen would be happy to sell you gas or electric, they don't care. But hopefully this video helped educate you and really thought about your needs. Think about your needs, apply what we've sort of taught you here to your particular situation. That way you can make an informed decision that you're happy with. As always, subscribe, check out our other videos on TikTok, etc. Stay tuned for more.